Hello, and a very warm welcome back to Widowed AF. You're here with me. I'm your host. I'm Rosie Moss. I'm always here. Now, today's episode is a little bit different from the usual format. Instead of coming on to bare her soul, Emma Gray's already done that. She's back to talk about her new ventures and life a little bit further into the journey of widowhood. So, very warm welcome back to the show, Emma. It's lovely to have you here.
Oh, thank you. It's so lovely to be here.
What the listeners don't know is the utter arse ache it was to get us both on this call. You know, you get two neurodivergent women without a technical bone between them, and somehow we've made it.
Yes.
Whoop, whoop.
Fingers crossed. I still worry about my connection, but I'm here.
We're mainly worried that Emma's AirPods are going to fall out because she smiles too much, bless. That's a nice reason for them to fall out, though, isn't it?
Pop out of my ears.
So it's all right. It's all right. It's okay. We'll wing it, mate. We'll wing it. This is how this whole thing has come to be and continues to flourish. Now, Emma, last time you were here, you talked very, very beautifully about the loss of your husband, Simon. And at the time, you were primarily kind of channeling all of this knowledge that you'd had to learn on the hoof, as it were, into helping other widows through. You were doing a lot of work around wills and the admin of things. In fact, actually, I do have a funny little story here, guys. So I'm just going to break with my own plan. So when I wrote my book, yeah, obviously I have to mention the book every episode. I did a chapter called Sadmin. And Sadmin is a term that I'd heard within the widow community, and it basically refers to the admin, the unrelenting admin. So the book has been published, it's out, it's in people's sticky hands, and I get an email from my publisher, and he says, he knows me quite well, so he says, don't panic, but we might have a slight problem with the book. Did you know that the word Sadmin is trademarked? And I was like, oh shit. So we go and have a little look into who owns a trademark, and lo and behold, who owns a trademark, Emma?
Rainbow hunting.
Rainbow hunting, which is your business, right?
Yeah. So being a lawyer, it's one of the things I did is I registered my R with a star, my rainbow hunting logo, and then Sadmin, because I just was worried. And actually back when I did it, Sadmin wasn't really being banded around, and it's really fascinating when you look back at the date when I registered it's not really used, but at the moment it seems to be used more and more, which is a little bit scary because it's only me. But anyway, yes, your publisher and you have been utterly gorgeous, so yeah.
Well, I just went, oh, it's all right, I know her, she'll be fine. So those of you who have a copy of the book, you actually have a special edition, because all future editions will have the little trademark sign next to the word Sadmin. So there you go. There's a little anecdote for you.
Very good.
So Emma, talk to me about what life is like for you now, because you've gone on and done more qualifications. You're like this woman that never quits.
No, I do never quit. I did tax exams on maternity leave. I think that probably should have given
Jesus Christ.
Yeah, it should have given. I thought it was great because you have all this spare time. Little did
Oh
I
yeah,
realize.
oh yeah, loads of it.
But yeah, and being very neurospicy, I always get a passion project, and often in the past my passion projects have switched and changed, and since I set up rainbow hunting, it has been my passion project and my hyper focus without a shadow of a doubt. And yeah, like you said, I'd been a wills and probate lawyer, so it seemed obvious that what I wanted to do was coach other people in why they were struggling to do what we know we all need to do, but yet 2/3 of Britons haven't got a will. But it kind of always felt like an uphill struggle. And then you contacted me about this after I had a strategy day. And in my strategy day, one of the things that she'd done is say which bits of the business really fill your cup. And like you said, I've gone on and I've got counselling qualifications and a grief educators course, and certification and stuff like that. And I go to trauma conferences and feel like I love them. I'm such a geek for the knowledge on all the trauma side of things, which is a little bit unusual, but that I don't think enough people think about grief as trauma, and love heals trauma. So then part of the grief process is learning to not just be able to accept the love externally, but actually learning to love ourselves. And that's where the self-discovery for all of us I think, comes in. And then that evening, I had a massive low. Oh my gosh, Rosie, I cannot tell you, which is so peculiar because I'd made this like really big business decision about the direction I was going to go. And the sadmin will still be there, but it'll be like a little module underneath the grief umbrella as like part of the grief. You need to sort out the paperwork, but it won't be the main thing anymore. And it'll also come from a more psychology perspective of not so much just what you need to do, but why you're struggling with it, what's getting in the way, find some self-compassion for that, and what can help you do it, knowing that you want to do it, but your nervous system is telling you that it doesn't want to do it. Which I think any of us who've been through a bereavement can totally get. But I hit this massive low, which was like really crazy because I'd made this big decision as to what I was doing. And I was crying so much in bed that it was almost like go back 10 years to when my husband died. And I was like, geez, I'm going to have to get up. I can't sleep. It's 1 o'clock in the morning. I never can't sleep. Went downstairs, made myself a cup of tea, and I wrote, which is what I often do to like process. And I'm not going to publish it until later in the year when I'm ready to do a bit more griefy stuff. But then at 2 o'clock, I was like, I finally work out why I'm so upset, because leaving the paperwork or having it as a much, much smaller part of rainbow hunting is another severance of a tie of my life with my husband. Like he carried me through my law career. He carried me through my totally bonkers concept that I could do tax exams on maternity leave. He carried me through when I used to not be able to sleep at 3 o'clock in the morning because I was worried about whether I'd done an IHT calculation wrong and HM revenue customs were going to be after us and stuff like that. Whereas with the therapy, I have so many checks and balances and supervision, and I don't tend to worry about it. I don't know why. I love doing what I do. I can see the positive benefits of what I do. I quite often focus on the growing life around the grief. So the processing of the grief is like the presenting problem, but what we work with is all the other stuff that gets bubbled to the surface when you're bereaved, because you just do not have the energy to be able to hide anymore, because the grief is just so all-consuming. And so I realized that actually this strategic shift is another part of my self-discovery journey of being who I want to be, rather than clinging on to apron strings as to who I was when I was married.
It's really interesting, Emma, because you're right. We change, and not always for not always for the worse. You know, we change, we develop, we grow, and grief kind of really puts that under the microscope, doesn't it? And lots of changes happen in a very quick time, and each one does feel a little bit like you're letting go of the old you. Now, when you came on last time, one of the things that stuck with me and with several listeners as well was you said something, and I'm not going to quote it verbatim, but it was something about you always suspected that you were a little bit different to other people, that your brain worked in a slightly different way. And when Simon died, the grief meant that you just did not have the energy or the capability to mask anymore. So this mask, because I know that you're neurodivergent and you openly disclose. And I was thinking, bloody hell, how did she do a law degree? You know, all of these things. But this mask that you had held so beautifully for so long, you just didn't have the strength to hold that mask up anymore. And that's when the kind of the metaphorical wheels came off for you. Is that something that you're doing within your grief counselling, you know, trying to understand why this might happen to those of us that perhaps were undiagnosed 100%. Previously?
So, 100%. I think it's such a valid point, Rosie, and I don't think we talk about it enough. But I think that grief does what I say in Emma lingo, because so much of what I do is very Emma. It's not very traditional counselling, but we can come back to that. But in Emma lingo, I say that grief puts a metaphorical magnifying glass over other stuff. And the reason that the grief puts the metaphorical magnifying glass is because the processing of the grief emotions, and even just feeling physically and emotionally and mentally everything that you feel when you're bereaved, it's so all-consuming and overwhelming. You don't have time to be able to mask and to hide and to have the coping strategies that actually take a little bit of conscious thought to be able to do stuff. And yes, I've always felt like a square peg in a round hole until I've embraced being different.
Yeah. It's so empowering, isn't it? Once you kind of get through because again, there's another element of grief as well, because you grieve
Yeah.
for the person you were before you understood yourself, and the opportunities you might have missed because of your neurodiversity. But once you reach that point, I suppose, yeah, it is a little bit like grief, because when you reach that stage of acceptance, okay, this is who I am. I
Yeah.
know myself now. Now my living can begin. There is a
Yeah.
real freedom in that, and the same really applies to grief. Is when you accept and actually said about growing life around the grief. When you accept that the grief it's a permanent, fundamental part of who you are, but you can live an amazing life around it. That's when the acceptance begins.
Definitely. And I often compare grief to surfing, because I think you can learn to be the best surfer in the world, but the waves are going to still come, and every now and then there's still going to be one. Even if you're really good at coping and you're really good at riding them, there's still going to be one that knocks you off course. And so I think even though you grow this beautiful world around it, like I did, I'm nearly this July, I'm 10 years down the line from my husband having died. At yet only a week or so ago, I was crying, like literally those, like, I don't know, animal sobs with a snotty nose, ugly, messy crying, which I haven't done for years.
And I think that's something that does surprise you as well. And
Mm.
when you're 1 year, maybe even 2 years, you'd be looking at this 10-year point and thinking, right, I'll be fixed by then. And actually you're not fixed. This idea of wanting to fix ourselves, it's a fool's errand, really. You're going to feel better. Christ, you're going to feel better, guys. If you're listening and you're in the early days, you're going to feel
100%.
better at 10 years than you do at a year. But it is still going to sideswipe you. For me, I can feel like I'll just be really off one day, like just really irritable and off, and then I'll realize it's a significant date, and then
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, okay, that's what that is. That's my body keeping score. But it's having the knowledge and the understanding of why we're responding like this that gives you the power to live with it. And I think that probably is, and I'm kind of making assumptions here, but I'm guessing that's kind of the underpinning of what you do is teaching
Yeah.
people the why, why
Yeah.
this is happening,
And
because
and
knowledge is power, right?
knowledge absolutely is power, Rosie. And I think there's two elements of the knowledge. One is a bit of psychoeducation, and I love that part of it. And I sometimes do workshops and webinars and stuff. And I love that part of it, of like, just because you're feeling totally unable, for example, to do your will, um, it's not because you're stupid. It's not because you can't do the admin. Sometimes it's just because your body is trying to protect you, and that numbness is totally a nervous system shutdown. So to understand how to bring yourself back into what's called the window of tolerance and back into a calm
I've just been
space.
doing that with my counsellor, the
Oh,
window
it's
of tolerance. She
amazing.
gave me a printout this week.
Yeah. And I don't know whether she explained to you, but we all have a window of tolerance, and it's a space in which you can think clearly, you can think logically, you can have lovely social conversations. You're online, as it were, and you're online in a social way and a community way, and you can really explain to people how you are and everything like that. And outside the window, in my Emma language, you have two places that you tend to flip to. And in my world, I always say if you flip above the window, that's like hypervigilance. And that's when you feel angry, you feel frustrated, you snap at the kids when it's a totally disproportionate reaction because really they just spilt the milk on the floor. But because you're outside your window of tolerance, it seemed like the biggest disaster in the world. And that place is, I think, where a lot of people live a lot of the time after grief, because you've had this horrendous thing happen and your body is just on notice, waiting for the next, am I allowed to
Yeah.
swear?
Yes.
The next shitstorm that's going to come and hit you and sideswipe you. um so often I find, and that's where people can burn out, but also it's having a bit of compassion that actually sometimes that's really useful. Like if you don't push yourself outside your window of comfort every now and then, you're not necessarily going to grow. So every now and then you need that adrenaline and that cortisol, and to be above the window to be able to do the really tricky stuff. But you just can't live there because you'll get snappy and angry and
Exhausting.
exhausted, utterly exhausted. And then when all of that gets too much, in Emma language, because it's me, I always say that you flip below the window as if you were a dormouse curling up to go to sleep. And again, from the outside, you might look non-emotional, numb, ignoring people, totally shut down, totally offline. But actually, the dormouse knows it needs a break. It's not in the window of tolerance, but it can't cope with being in that hypervigilance, and it just needs to rest and restore and to recover. But grief shrinks your window of tolerance. And I used to laugh about it and go, oh, my window of tolerance has shrunk to the size of a keyhole. But actually, that's incredibly distressing, because it means you're virtually never in it. So it's learning, and often it's the somatic stuff that brings us in the window. So it's especially for us neurospicy people. So it's like, what are the things that we can do to calm our nervous system, to bring us back into the window and to widen the window so that we can, we grow life around grief.
And what can you do? I mean, I don't want to kind of mine you for information, but I'm thinking if somebody's listening now, as I am listening to you right now, and I'm thinking, yep, I live way up above that window of tolerance, like 90% of the time. And it's so interesting that you use the word dormouse, because throughout my life, and I don't just mean since grief, when things have been difficult for me, I go to sleep. I may not actually sleep, but my safe place is my bed. I pull the duvet over my head. There's like my nose and my eyes peeking out. And I used to call it dormousing, because that's it. I can't cope with it. And I said to my counsellor this, I said, why is this kind of this need to go to sleep when I'm stressed? And she said, well, you can't get drunk anymore. You know, so for you to escape the overwhelm, what's the ultimate shutdown? It's sleep, right? Yeah. That's when everything switches off. So it makes a lot of sense. But sorry, I've gone off on a little Rosie tangent. There we go. So
I love our
somebody
tangents, but they're all super,
you've got to love a tangent.
I love it. But it's all super relevant, because what you're saying is so relatable to so many people. And I think the dormouse has to be safe. And where could be safer than being, like, hopefully for most people, snuggled up in bed in your own home on your own, you know, like, yes, you might get lonely, but actually it's one of the things I've really learned with my autistic younger daughter is in grief, it often exposes your hidden wounds. This is another Emma tangent, so apologies, but
I'm fascinated.
But yeah, so it exposes your hidden wounds, and my biggest hidden wound, without a shadow of a doubt, is abandonment. So grief was just the ultimate for me.
Ultimate abandonment,
and the rejection sensitivity is horrendous for me anyway. It's not just an emotional or a mental thing. I feel it physically in my body, and it's horrendous. It's been one of my biggest challenges with my business, because literally someone just not returning
and things.
And someone just not returning a text message, I can then scroll back and look at the text message I sent them and be like, oh my good God, did they like misinterpret
what did I do?
This?
It's always what did I do?
What I said, why is it? And it's always in my head my fault. But what's fascinating, and where it comes into the dormouse with my younger daughter, is she's autistic. She's very happy for me to share, but she's autistic. She's learnt a lot about her autism and how to live well as she can with her autism. But it's been a long old journey, and she's 16 now. And we've been through all sorts of hell with school trauma and school non-attendance and all sorts of stuff, which is one of the reasons I love my business so much. But where it comes to the dormouse is when she is overstimulated, she has to reduce the stimulation in her world. And the way she does that is she retreats to her room, and she watches the same stuff on the telly that she has watched not hundreds or thousands, but probably millions of times. She probably knows the words better than anyone else, but it's reliable, it's safe, it enables her to regulate herself and to come back down to it. I guess it's like people rewatching Friends box sets, you know?
Yeah.
It's just the familiarity of what you're watching. But where it relates to my hidden wound is abandonment. So you then get a neurospicy parent parenting a neurospicy child. And we've had to have endless conversations where I go, I feel like I'm abandoning you by leaving in your room so that you can watch this stuff over and over again. And she's like, no, Mum, I need this. This is what I need to regulate. I actually don't want you in my room. I want you to bugger off and leave me on my own. And it's really fascinating having the two different neurospices with different ways of coping and communicating and different love languages, and learning how each person regulates. And I've just been to London, and I cannot go on the underground now in a calm space without my noise cancelling headphones playing a specific tune, or basically on repeat. but that helps me. Some people it's smells, some people it's touch, and it'll be different for different people. But one of the things that's fascinating, if people don't know, is start to think about, when did I feel calm when I was a child? What was it? And you were saying you always used to retreat to your room. So actually, the kids know mum occasionally, when it all gets too much, she's actually not going to scream us up when we spill the milk. If we say, mum, go and just have a minute in your room, and you can start to have a joke in the family that actually helps everybody. So yeah, it's an interesting one. The neurospicy and the grief is like utterly, utterly, utterly fascinating. I really love it.
I always say that after any social interaction, I have to take my trousers off and get into bed. And it's just become like a family. We'll go out, I'll get out the car, the kids will kind of coming in behind me, and I'll be straight up those stairs and into my bed, and they might pop in and say, "You all right, mum?" I'm like, "Yep, I'll be down in a minute. I just need a little bit of time." And it's, I guess what we're doing as well is we're modeling to them, because I've got two neurodivergent children, and I didn't have anybody to model because nobody knew that I was neurodivergent. So I can now figure it out and hopefully guide them a little bit along the way. But I do think there's something to be said as well for the enormous pressure. And I'm cautious of not making this sound negative, because I adore my children and I wouldn't want to parent anybody else. But when you are neurodivergent, and I'm autistic and have ADHD, so there's a lot going on in my brain already, right? And then you're parenting children with the same condition, where it might present in a similar or even a completely different way, because we know it's a spectrum. It's exhausting. It's really, really exhausting. And for the widowed parents out there who are walking this path, we're doing it on our own. And especially when the children are younger, because Tabby's 8 now, so she's getting a little bit older. But when they were younger, there was no respite. There was no, I'm going to go and take my trousers off and get into bed, because the kids were, you couldn't take your eyes off them. They were at the age of jumping off furniture and things. And I don't know whether that's something that you've come across, or anything that you've given any thought to. I'm really kind of thinking on the hoof, but just how little support there is for these parents out there.
I feel like you're talking about my life, because then, like, the only way, like you say, you can't leave them. So the only way I would have to do it is stick on something like Teletubbies, or I can't remember their favourite CBeebies programs now.
Peppa Pig.
Oh, well, mine are now 16 and 18. So I now watch Bridgerton with them. So it's very different now. But
Octonauts was the one with my 16-year-old. Octonauts, I loved Octonauts.
Octonauts. Yeah, all that kind of stuff. And I actually would have a snooze curled up with the kids, and they thought mummy was watching telly with them. Actually, I wasn't paying a single bit of attention to the telly. I was just chilling. But I wish I'd known more of it back then, and I wish I'd been more alive to compassion for myself. I will never forget. So I'm diagnosed ADHD, but now that my daughter, and we got our diagnosis at the same time, but I only asked to be assessed for ADHD. And I now say that I'm ADHD, but I align more with autism. And I think the ADHD is really just trying to cover up the autism. And
that's exactly what they said to me.
Yeah, and all my struggles, and all my feeling like a square peg in a round hole, and all my bullying, and all my stuff that I've struggled with my whole entire life. Actually, people like me for my ADHD. People don't understand me for my autism. But I don't feel like I need a diagnosis. And when he gave me the diagnosis, I'll never forget this. I literally burst into floods of tears, because it was such a relief to know that I wasn't broken, and there wasn't something wrong with me, and it wasn't my fault, and it wasn't something I'd done. I just am wired a bit differently. And it was the beginning of learning to love myself, and learning to love myself for all the stuff that I used to get bullied for, and actually realizing that there's some hidden powers in there. I am super empathetic, to the point where sometimes I can feel people's emotions. I actually physically feel them in my body, which makes me quite good at what I do, helping people in the therapy space, because I can literally say to them, gosh, I'm feeling really stuck here, or I'm feeling really like I want to cry, or sometimes I do cry, and I share it all with them, because it kind of validates how they're feeling. And and makes them feel more normal for how they're feeling. But I think that empathy is part of the autism, because I'm on high alert all the time. I'm so super sensory. I take everything in. I can't wear certain clothes because they're scratchy and they're itchy. And doing the horses is a freaking nightmare sometimes, because if I get a piece of hay, I feel like someone's sticking a needle in my foot. Like, I'm just like
Yeah.
so easily like
I will take my shoe
dysregulated.
off in a public street if there's
Oh,
something in my shoe. I don't
100%.
care. Shoes
Yes,
off,
yes,
socks off.
100%. And the kids will be like, Mum, put your feet away. And I'm like, I can't
Yeah, yeah,
walk
yeah.
any further with this thing in my foot. And
But
but then it'll be like the
even that,
smallest, tiniest little thing in my bloody shoe. And it's like, for fuck's sake. But I've
that's
learned that that's
self-compassion, isn't
okay.
it? It's make
Yeah,
That's advocating for yourself in a really tiny way. That's advocating for yourself. And things
yeah,
like noise cancelling headphones, as soon as I discovered those, my life changed. I can go to Blue Water on my own, not on
yeah.
a Saturday, and if I've got headphones in. Those are my criteria. But any other time, I would have a panic attack and I didn't understand why. Why? I used to say I'm allergic to Blue Water. Why? And it's the noise, it's the
It's
smells, it's the
crazy. And
crowds, it's
I think
everything.
also you can blame yourself. It's like I'm the
Mm.
one who's allergic. No, it's just a super sensory environment where actually a lot of neurotypical people struggle. So not surprising that us neurospicy find it really hard. Um, so yeah.
Ask you, Emma, about you mentioned there your slightly different approach to therapy, to being a therapist. Sorry. Now, it's public knowledge. I've been seeing my therapist for 4.5 years, and one of the most frustrating things is I know nothing about her. I know her first and her last name. I don't know where she lives. I don't know whether she's married or in a relationship. I don't know whether she's got kids. And as a nosy bugger and a people pleaser as well, it drives me mad. And I'll walk in and I'll say, "Oh, morning, and did you have a nice holiday? If she's been away and go anywhere nice?" And she's like, "Yes, lovely, thank you, Rosie, but let's talk about you." And she
Yeah.
really flips it back. And I just sometimes I love the sound of your approach of really connecting with the person that's talking to you. How But also that must take a toll on you because you're
Mm.
absorbing so much from
Well,
other people. Just really interested to know how that works for you.
yeah, so actually, it probably doesn't take a toll in the way you think it does. So I started off without really very many qualifications at all in this therapy coaching space. So I called myself coach, and I focused more on the paperwork because that was what I'd done before. And in the background, I was doing my qualification for my counselling. And then as soon as I qualified, I had a massive imposter syndrome, proper full on neurodivergent. Oh my God, am I actually in the wrong space doing the wrong thing? Because in the former stuff I'd been doing, I share everything. I mean, anyone who follows me on Instagram, I say good morning every morning. I'm not filtered, because the first time I put a filter on, someone ranted at me because they like me because I'm authentic. And I was like, I literally looked 100 years old with no makeup on. But that's what people seem to like. So I'm now totally unfiltered. And I share the shit. So like this morning, I shared that when I got in at 11:30 last night, the first thing that happened was my elder daughter screamed at me because the dog had just thrown up on the bed. Like, yes, I had this lovely time in London and I spoke at Excel and this, that, and the other. But the reality is, I've got a normal, crazy household at home.
I'm home, you're
But that
clearing up dog sick.
Yes, and she hadn't moved the dog or a blanket or anything, so it had soaked through into the duvet. So I'm going to have to clean the duvet at some
Oh,
point. And I was really, really tired and dysregulated as well from 2 days of peopling, which is a lot for me. And I love it, but I also hate how much it drains me. So I just wanted to curl up and go to bed.
you heard the term ambivert? You heard that
You
term?
know, I like the sound of it.
No, I've just come across it, and from what I know, I think it's when you're like you want to be an extrovert, but you're an introvert, and you can flip between the two, but you have
Yeah,
to give the introvert side of yourself space as well. Because
yeah,
I like people, I love talking to people, I love
yeah,
being social and around people, and then I'll hit a wall, and it's like I need to go, and I need to go right now,
yeah.
and I need to take
Yeah.
my trousers
The
off and
kids
get into
laugh at
bed.
me, Rosie, because I always reverse park so that I'm facing forwards for an easy exit.
So it's easier. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
So when I'm
yeah,
slightly dysregulated and I'm going to leave, I'm not going to crush the car as I get out the car park.
yeah. And also the joy of the French exit. I used to
Yeah.
think you have to go and say goodbye to
No,
everybody and,
no.
really, you don't. You can
Yeah.
do a little
No.
wave and off you fuck.
Yeah. 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 But going back to the counselling, if you want me to,
I do.
So when I then qualified, like a lot of counsellors say nothing about themselves, and so when you're a qualified therapist counsellor, it's a requirement of my regulatory body BACP to have supervision. So I took to supervision, like, help. I don't want to stop sharing stuff that's going on in my life, because that seems to be what people like, and it seems to be what draws people to me. And she turned it around and she said to me, she was like, if you went to see someone, would you want to know that they can relate? And I was like, hell yes. Like, what we've been through, especially when it gets a bit more nichey, you're neurodivergent and you're bereaved, and there was cancer, and there's the military. I mean, you can get as nichey as you want in my world. And then people come to me and they say, is this too close? And I'm like, no, this is perfect, because this is exactly where I feel I can help, because I don't fix anyone. The answers are inside of you. You just can't see them. My role is to support you, maybe with a bit of psychoeducation, maybe just repeating back open questions, asking you a little bit more, trying to shift your perspective a little bit on stuff and help you see your own answers. And if sharing my own experience helps, then absolutely. But I am quite boundaried. So, like, there's never any photos of my kids. The only photos of my kids, they won't be 16 and 18. They're like, I've got like stock images that the kids have approved that they're okay.
Yeah.
Quite a few of them are them with their dad. And even when I write, and I'm very careful in particular about my younger daughter, because obviously, like, she's got a PDA profile of autism, so
Oh, yes.
that pathological demand avoidance element is very tricky to parent, and brings up a lot of stuff for us, I think. And so I've had to have conversations with her of like, I think I could help other people by sharing how I've managed and how I cope with it all, but are you okay with that? And she's been yes, but then there are still boundaries as to where we don't go with it. And when we're in a session, like, my clients will sometimes say, how are you? And I'll very quickly answer. But then I do always say the annoying thing about, these sessions are for you and they're not for me.
Mm-hmm.
But actually, the fact that you want to know about my life is really interesting. I wonder what's going on there. Like, is there a fawn trauma response in there? Is there a people pleaser? And actually, just unpicking what it is about you that is so interested in what's going on in my world, that can be really, really useful and can be really interesting to explore, to help people on that self-discovery journey of understanding themselves a bit better.
It all comes down to this: why am I doing this? You've
Mm,
just mentioned a fawn response. Now,
yeah.
I'm broadly familiar with it, but I don't think everybody is, because it's one of the lesser known kind of responses. We know fight or flight. So just tell me a little bit about what fawn response might look like, and also perhaps whether it's more prevalent in people that are neurodivergent as well,
I think it probably is,
because of
because
that masking chameleon
yeah,
aspect.
it's pretending.
Mm.
And I can go a little bit deeper on the fawn response. And what's utterly fascinating is I found, when I was doing my counselling training, especially the theory side of it, is that it was integrative. So I learned loads and loads and loads of different theories. What we were encouraged to do is to use as many of them as possible on ourselves. So a lot of what I
Right.
talk about, I've actually learned because of how much, and I think that's one of the reasons I love your podcast so much, because you're so open about how all of this lands with you as well. Right. Okay. So the fawn, and everyone knows that you can flip above your window of tolerance to fight or flight, or you could go down and be the dormouse and shut down. But the other trauma response is called fawn, and it is kind of that roll over and look after other people thing. So what
Mhm.
has happened is that at some point in their lives, and I have a massive fawn trauma response, but at some point in their lives, people have realized, if I look after everybody else, then we'll all be okay and we'll survive. But what is sad in that picture is they end up abandoning themselves. And that's the bit that needs unpicking, is at what point did you learn that actually to look after everyone else and put yourself right at the bottom of the priority list was the right way to do things? And why was that a survival thing? And what can be really helpful is look at the benefits, like, how did it actually help you? Because at some point in your life, it will have helped you. So I think that's where, for us neurospicy people, it helped us fit in. It helped us focus
Yeah.
on everyone else, and it helped us feel less ostracized and less different, and less like we had like things poking out of our heads and all the rest of it. And it can be really interesting, but also the layer deeper that I've discovered more recently with myself is, if you've got a fawn trauma response, you're often one of life's givers. So you're very, very good at giving to other people, but you're not very good at receiving. And I know personally the reason I give is because I can stay in control when I'm giving. I boundary it. I fascinatingly, I'm better at it in my professional life than I am at home. I'm more likely to get compassion fatigue at home than I am through work, because I work so hard at the boundaries in work. But if you are going to be receiving, especially if you're neurospicy, you might have learned at a young age that actually it might come with conditions, it might not be reliable, it might be taken away from you, it may never even be given. So the whole concept of receiving feels very unsafe. And so how can you practice, a little bit like going to the gym, practice receiving? Practice, even if it's just receiving a thank you. Like, I used to be really rubbish when people said, "Oh, I really like your hair." Oh yeah, this, like, I got roots, and and I think I even did it to you today. Like, I still
Yeah.
find it a real challenge to receive anything, compliments, gifts. And gifts, I'm like, I hate, because I'm like, what expectations do they have over how pleased I am with this? like
Yeah.
because the
Yeah.
social norms you've had to learn, and actually you don't know what the social norms are with being gifted this thing, so like, help. Whereas actually, if you give something to someone else, if they don't react quite as you want, well, we're all used to disappointment in the neurospicy world, aren't we? So we just crack on and get on with
Yeah.
it.
And I'm wondering as well whether there's that link between abandonment, because if you put too much trust in somebody, or and I'm even thinking of our husbands, and how, for me personally, how reliant I was on Ben. I was on maternity leave at the time, so I was entirely financially reliant on him. And then he got taken away. And whether he chose to go or not, it still feels like an abandonment. And me and my friend, she's also neurodivergent, we move in packs. And we have this kind of on-running joke where one of us might ask the other one for a favour. And it might be, I don't know, could you pick my daughter up from school, or something like that, back when I used to have a daughter in school. And we'd always kind of caveat it with, please, I hope you don't mind, you can have one of my kidneys, because we felt like we were asking for so much. Whereas it seems like other people have no issue just
No
going, oh, would you mind
qualms.
picking my kid up? Because I don't mind doing it. I do it for anybody. Why can't I ask for the same for myself? It's really strange. It's like we don't feel like we're worthy of it.
Yeah, not worthy. And I think often we've got a not good enough, not worthy script when we're neurospicy, because we were different. So yeah, I used to joke that I would struggle to say yes to something that was gifted to me on a silver platter.
Yeah.
Just
Because you think it always comes with a caveat.
well, social expectations, isn't it, as to how you're going to receive it and what
Yeah.
people are going to get back in return and all the rest of it.
What do you want from me? And the kind of abandonment, because I say, I haven't got a fear of abandonment, but I think I do. I think I don't trust that people will stay in my life. I've lost, both through death and through just friendship breakdowns. I've lost some people that were incredibly close to me, sometimes without any reason. And I feel like you're left with all these unanswered questions. Why didn't you want to be my friend anymore? I feel like I feel it takes me right back to being kind of 8 or 9, I guess. It doesn't feel like an adult response.
No. And that's the bit that's fascinating in therapy, because you take people back to, so tell me more about 8. Like, what did that 8-year-old need? And we're not going to go into this. You have your own therapist, but it's
I wanted a free session.
Not in front of everybody. We can do that later. Like, what did the 8-year-old need? And 9 times out of 10, the 8-year-old needed understanding and love for exactly their quirky, normal selves.
To be accepted as who you are, rather than this
Try to
because
change
again,
you.
and I think that fawn, I had a much older boyfriend at 17. He was nearly 30, and I was a challenging teenager, to say the least. But at 17, I moved out of the family home and I moved in with this much older boyfriend. And I formed a lot of my opinions around his, because let's be honest, at 17, you haven't really got your own opinions yet. You're not worldly enough. You haven't lived properly. And from that point onwards, I would kind of morph to be whoever the person I was in a relationship was. So my boyfriend, after him, he was in a band, he was a musician. So I got my lip pierced and my hair was bleached and I wore band t-shirts and reinvented myself as a rock chick.
Love
And
it.
whilst I know that all of us go through periods of reinvention in our lives, that's
Mm.
part of growing up and figuring out who you are. I can remember very vividly this sense of not having a real opinion. Just they were all borrowed opinions. And I don't know
Yeah.
whether it's and looking back, I think, well, of course, you struggle to take in information. And my big fear is I might say, I like this band, for example, and somebody saying to me, what's your favourite song? Now, my neurospicy brain will go blank and I won't be able to remember a single song that this band have
Mm.
written. And then I'll feel like I look like a fraud. Do you
Yeah.
see what I mean? It's all
Yeah.
tapping into this
100%.
circle, isn't it?
Yeah. Massively. And I
Complex
do find
creatures,
it,
aren't we?
yeah, I do find it utterly fascinating. And like, I think that's the gift of therapy, is helping people to try to understand. One of my clients who just recently finished, she was like, this has just been the best self-discovery journey ever.
Mm.
And she came with grief, but a whole heap of other stuff. And there's all it, it it's not a one-stop shop. You need to keep going back, because life changes and life chucks stuff at you, and all the rest of it. I wish that people would have therapy as a wellness tool rather than a crisis purchase, because actually when people come to me as a crisis purchase, I'll absolutely see them. But the first thing I have to do is to make them feel safe with their emotions, with their physical environment, with what's going on. And you can't go anywhere near the deep stuff until you feel like you're in control of exactly what's around you. Um, so I wish that people would go to therapy for wellness. Um,
The Americans do, don't they? I mean, that's
yeah,
one thing they do better than others is
yeah,
they do. It's very much accepted as just something that kind of helps you through life because whether you're grieving or not, life at the moment feels very scary. Our external world is terrifying, right? And
yeah,
and and everybody's got stuff going on personally. Lots of people are very worried financially. There's always something going on. And I think one of the real kind of missells, if you like, of therapy is this notion that it's a 6-week course. And I think this is something that's come from the NHS, presumably because of budget constrictions. And
yeah,
you are able to access one 6-week course and then you can
yeah,
reapply and have another one and then you're done.
yeah,
Now, I'm thinking, like I said, I've been in therapy 4.5 years. I shudder to think what I've spent on therapy, but I don't drink anymore, so I offset it against that.
yeah.
But the idea that you can be fixed with something as complex as what I went through in 6 weeks is just completely abhorrent to me. And I'm
Yeah.
wondering if that's why people maybe would come to you and think, right, I could do 6 sessions. And you must be thinking, oh, gosh, actually, you're going to need a few
So
more. And
yeah,
that's
so
quite a difficult conversation.
I do find it a tricky conversation, because I also find it very hard that I'm a business, I'm not a charity. Um,
Yeah.
so and I have ploughed so much of my own capital into getting to where I am now. And it is another thing that I'm starting to talk about, is actually how freaking hard it's been to set up a business and run a business and all the rest of it. So I definitely try to charge my worth, but when people come to me for sessions, I've literally just removed the ability to buy one session, because that was okay when I did paperwork stuff. I could maybe, give people a few pointers on the coachy points for paperwork in one session, but I can't do anything for therapy in the session. I
No.
just get to hear their story and that's it. And I often say, when I was doing my cruise volunteering, I'll never forget speaking to one of the other volunteers. And I was like, have you got a pattern? Me being neurospicy, spotting patterns. And she's like, what are you talking about? And I was like, oh, well, so I reckon in like sessions 1 and 2, like basically the client does loads of the talking and it's about know, like, and trust. And they get to know and trust and like me and feel safe in the concept. And I get a lot of people coming to me in rainbow hunting who have tried other therapy that hasn't worked.
Mm.
And that is always a really interesting discussion, like what was it about that therapy? And I think a lot of neurospicy people really struggle with CBT, but that's a whole nother conversation. And so and then in the middle couple of sessions, I always warn people that it'll get chunky and you might not even want to show up. And I've seen some of your little videos when you've been in the car and you've been like, has anyone else sat outside and not wanted to go in? 100%. Often my
Mhm.
people are really nervous before they log on. So there's kind of a pattern within the session as well to try and make people comfortable at the beginning and also make them comfortable at the end, so they don't leave in floods of tears or anything like that. And then if they've got a package of 6, I always warn them, we can't go too deep, although online I think you go deeper quicker. But it's about empowering them, what they learned, what they're taking away, and all the rest of it. And I always say, sometimes people go on to buy 1 more, 2 more. I sometimes have people who see me for their first package weekly, and then maybe their second package, maybe weekly, maybe fortnightly, and then maybe monthly, so that they kind of still have their chance to come and see me, but financially they're spreading it out a little bit, and they're learning to stand on their own 2 feet and learning to do it themselves. But there's definitely a management of expectation, because 6 sessions is not a lot. It's not enough for complex grief. And a lot of the people who come to me with neurodivergence and grief, it is complicated, because the neurodivergence is another thing they're processing, because there's a grief of not being neurotypical and not being the same as everybody else. And I don't think anyone talks about that.
You alluded earlier to the bullying. A huge amount of us in the neurodivergent community, even those who presented as neurotypical, were bullied. I had a horrendous year. I think it was year 9 at school, and it was, I'm not saying it's the worst year of my life because my husband's since died, but up until that point, it was real trauma, and probably impacted how my friendships were formed, how I viewed myself. It triggered a severe eating disorder in me. So these traumas, they're going to make you who you are. But the way we were raised, we're a similar age, is you kind of don't talk about it. You're fixed now, it's dealt with, get on with your life. And what happens when you go into therapy is, particularly if you have a good therapist, is they will poke away at those bits, just gently, just chip away. And it's taken me years to open up about this and talk to my therapist. I self-disclose here that I had to spend some time in an institution when I was just 17, because my eating disorder was so prolific, and my parents were basically at the end of their tether. They didn't know what to do. And to talk about the trauma of being left. I'm using my little bunny ears here because they didn't want to leave me, but being left, it's that's going to impact how I form relationships ever since. And I would never have gone into therapy and talked about it had Ben not died and I hadn't accessed therapy for my grief.
Yeah, and I think you've hit on a couple of things there, because just so much love to you for everything that you've been through. I think it will resonate with a lot of people, and I don't think it's talked about enough. But I don't talk enough because I worry that people will see me as like a posh middle class Waitrose shopping kind of person. But I was sent to boarding school, and I was sent at 12, stayed there till I was 18, and that they were possibly, until my husband died, the worst years of my life. But I also knew that my parents were spending all their money on sending me away, because that's what one should do. And yet I don't know if they wanted to, but also I think my parents are possibly a bit neurospicy. Haven't told them this. I hope they're not listening.
Keep telling my dad.
We're slowly kind of acknowledging how neurospicy we are on all sides of the family. But it's quite screaming, really.
When you know.
Yeah, I'm not sure how well. I love her dearly, but my mum would have coped having us home all the time. I think we would totally have dysregulated her and oversensitized her by being home all the time. So I think she had a massive pull that society tells you that one should send your kids to these. And I went to her school, which she didn't even enjoy. Like, what? Do you send your kid to a place that you hate?
It's the dumb thing, right? In her world, that's what you do.
But there is, and I haven't read it yet because I have this horrendous addiction for buying books and not reading them. But I have got an amazing book. I've got this amazing book about boarding school syndrome, and there is a thing, and I think it then does resurface when you're bereaved of a spouse or a parent or something later in life, or a sibling, is that if you were sent to boarding school, there's a sense of abandonment. And the reason I picked on chatting about this now is I think you could probably align with it a little bit about going into that institution, but there was a sense of abandonment, like don't know what else to do with them, so just plonk them here. Then there's a bit of a bereavement because you're not in the family home anymore, you've been sent away, and you've got this grief of not being in this familiar surroundings anymore. You feel a little bit captive, like I can still remember writing a poem one day. I've never done anything with it. About seeing, because my parents lived miles away, so when everyone else could go away for weekends, I was still at school. So I would see the cars like snaking up and down the drive, and I couldn't go anywhere. I was left at school. And the sense of feeling captive and alone and what have you. And then the magic, but it's also horrendous, is you learn to disassociate. And I used to say I'm the queen of
Yes.
disassociation, and it is what makes me freaking good at my job, because I can do my notes,
Yeah.
do my email to my client, and know that I've done my bit, shut the laptop, and I don't think about it again because I've
Yeah.
done what I'm contracted to do, and that's absolutely fine. But when it comes to personal relationships and when it comes to social situations, the ability to disassociate can be seen as really rude. Like, and not
Yeah.
necessarily the best thing. And also you learn to disassociate from yourself. And I think there's a lot of unpicking there, which you can't do in 6 sessions.
No. No, oh gosh, I mean, the image of you looking out the window of
I
your school watching
know.
the cars come up the drive is breaking my heart.
And I was
But
so
this
skinny. Like when I'm
association is
distressed, I lose weight, and my
mm,
long hair just makes me look even skinnier. Like, not in a good way.
oh.
Yeah.
But that ability to and it's object permanence as well, which is quite common in neurodiversity, which is where basically if you don't see a friend for a while, to all intents and purposes, you forget they exist. And it's not callous, it's not uncaring, it's just because you haven't physically seen them or had contact from them, you will almost forget to make contact. And
Yeah.
that I'm again fascinated by this in grief and whether that impacts your grief. I don't know whether you know anything about
Oh,
this. Again, I'm thinking on the hoof, but
so some of my grief and neurodivergence is knowledge I've learned, and some of it is a gut feel I have from my own experience. But I think grief and neurodivergence is fascinating, and especially for us as a military family, because he was away all the time. So I
out of
genuinely
sight,
like
out of
people.
mind almost.
Yeah, and people used to say it's taking you so long to get over him. And it's like, well, part of me is kind of pretending he's still in Afghanistan. So, like, the only
Mhm.
thing is he's not in my phone anymore, but he was sometimes a bit shit at that anyway. So, 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 like, I mean, that was his one comment when he was sick. Oh, you'll be fine without me because you've basically single-handedly brought the kids up. And I'm like, little bit different that you're in my phone and alive on the planet. Like,
Mm.
but yeah, I think the whole neurodivergence and grief it makes a massive difference, because we're also super sensory. So then if our window of tolerance is shrunk and we're super sensory, then we can not understand why other people seemingly are coping with their bereavement and we're not coping with ours. And we're often hypervigilant, so then we're noticing what everyone else is doing and thinking that's not what's happening for me. And yeah, there's so much.
Yeah.
Mm.
And even that kind of, I can literally remember the police being in my house and I've just been told this awful news and I'm questioning how I'm behaving. Am I doing
Mm,
this right?
mm, mm.
Should I be doing this differently? And it's that almost looking at yourself objectively all the time, like you've got an audience, you're
Yeah.
almost performing for the crowd. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
Rather
but you're
than
solo. Yeah,
listening to what feels
100%.
authentically right for you.
Yeah. But I think that goes back
Yeah,
to the
funny old things,
fawn.
aren't we?
Yeah, because what you've learned in the fawn trauma response is I'll look after everyone else and I'll abandon and disassociate from myself. So actually, to be
Mm.
able to look internally, and it's called introspection when we've got a sense of feeling within ourselves. And like I was definitely, and still am at times, one of those people that actually doesn't know she needs a wee until I'm fit to bursting, because I
Oh,
can't
yeah, yeah,
always
yeah, yeah.
feel, which is really weird, because at other times I am so super sensitive and like dysregulated by a piece of straw in my boot, which they don't really sit side by side. But I think it's very, very common in neurodivergence, and I don't think it's talked about enough.
Yeah. Or you'll be doing something and you'll think, I'll just finish this before I reward myself with a wee. Like, what?
Yeah,
Why
yeah,
do I have
yeah.
to use it as a reward? I'm allowed to have a wee. If I've got anybody listening out there, which I'm sure I do, who are feeling completely, like the waves are really crashing at them, they're outside their window of tolerance, they're heightened or they're in dormouse. Is there any just quick 5-minute tricks that you can do? Is there a bit of breath work? Is there anything you would recommend to people to do to just really kind of bring you back into that window or help tone things down a little bit?
So I love you, but I hate you for talking about breath work, because I think it is really important,
Mm.
but my God, I'm shit at it. Like when people used to say, just breathe,
Are
I'd be
you?
like, but I am breathing. That's why I'm on the planet. Like, what is wrong? Like, can you not
Yeah,
see that
yeah.
I'm breathing? And I really didn't understand. And actually, even just last month, I was in the doctor's and for lots of different things, because my body totally keeps the score. And the more I'm talking to my body, the more it's screaming at me, which is really annoying. I think I'd rather
Hmm.
go back to the disassociated me.
Like, just shush now.
Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
done with this. And she prescribed me reading a book called Breath, because she was saying I literally only breathe into my chest.
Yeah,
And I
same.
can actually often feel myself only breathing into my chest. But the one
Yeah.
thing that really helped me with breathing was the person, and I love psychoeducation and like explaining bits and bobs. But the one thing that really helped me with the breathing was when someone said, long exhale will relax you, and short, sharp inhales will get you into that hyper, like get you moving and all the rest of it. And actually, suddenly
Yeah.
that made so much sense. It's actually, if I need to relax, I'm just going to breathe out, and you can almost feel your shoulders relaxing as you breathe out. And if I need some energy and I'm feeling totally lethargic and totally like a dormouse, it's literally about like little sips, like, and it wakes you up and it gets you going.
Interesting.
And so suddenly seeing breath work like that really, really, really helped me. So sometimes when I'm a bit
Stops it
anxious, it
feeling
doesn't.
so wishy-washy.
Yeah, and sometimes when I'm a bit anxious in bed, which doesn't happen a huge amount, but just I breathe out for 8 and I breathe in for 4, and that seems to really help me relax. Literally just focus on breathing out for 8 and in for 4 to just relax me. And it takes my brain, it shuts the noise a little bit out of my brain, because I have a very noisy brain.
You're having to
But the other,
focus on something else, aren't
yeah,
you?
yeah, yeah,
When you're counting in
definitely.
your breath. But my
Yeah,
counsellor will say to me, she'll ask me a question and she'll say to me, "You've stopped breathing."
yeah,
And I will realise that I have. I've literally stopped
yeah,
breathing. I'm holding my breath.
yeah,
And I
yeah,
think that to her, I mean, she loved it because it's a little physical reaction that she's hit a nerve somewhere. She's like, where are you feeling
yeah,
that in your body? But
yeah,
I realise that I, like you, I breathe very, very shallow. And some, I'll go through, again, I'll go through phases. So I've, you know me, I've done the ice baths and meditation, the yoga, I'll give it all a go. And the breath work, it's like a 20-minute breath work routine and it works so well. Why don't I do it anymore? Because it's a demand and I've got PDA, but I
yeah,
know it
yeah,
works. And it is, I even watched a video and it said if you're feeling quite anxious, you need to do like dinosaur arms, crouch and hiss like a dinosaur. I kid you not, I did that the other day. If my kids had seen me, I'd have been sectioned. But it just, because you feel so ridiculous. I don't know
yeah.
if that's the theory behind it, but it's sort of, oh, okay, right, let's get on
Yeah,
with
but
it.
I remember being told if you go to an interview to do a power pose in the toilets, and I went to one interview that was really stressing, a legal one that was stressing I wasn't going to get, and I went to the toilets and I did a power pose and I got the interview. I got the job. I was like, maybe it works.
Amazing. If we could have
But
photos of people doing power poses in
I
toilets
know,
sent to the
wouldn't that be
podcast,
so
that would be
funny?
amazing.
Wouldn't that be so funny? But the other thing that I often say to people that seems to really help them is I'm like, especially if they've got kids, but even if you haven't got kids, I think you could imagine this just for yourself. But if people who have, they tend to be that fawn, they tend to prioritize everyone else and they go into survival mode. And as long as the kids have got 3 meals on the table, they've got their school bags for school, yada, 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 yada. And I'm like, just add one more person into the family, and that person is little Rosie, and she's 8. So when you make a drink for the kids, make a drink for little Rosie. When you tell the kids we're all really tired and we need some rest, tell little Rosie there's a lot going on in this family at the moment. We're all really tired. We need a rest. And for some reason, almost externalizing the self-care to this like fabricated little version of ourselves seems to really help both me and my clients to better look after ourselves, because love heals trauma. So if we can learn to just love and look
Feels
after
trauma.
ourselves, then yeah, so love heals trauma. And what we so often do is we go searching for that love externally. So people want new relationships, they want other people to look after them, to tell them they're okay. But it's also about learning to love yourself, and that's where the big work comes.
Yeah.
But even in the interim, you can at least learn to help yourself survive better by having drinks, having healthy food, going outside and getting some exercise. But for some reason, we seem to be better at looking after ourselves when we imagine little us. You can even get a photo
It's
of
really
little me.
interesting, isn't it?
Yeah. I've got a photo of little
Oh my
me
God, with my
and my
full
sister on the wall.
bowl cut.
Yeah. I might
I
have to
was
share
an
it on
ugly child.
Instagram, Rosie.
Yeah, you should. You
My
should.
sister
Yeah,
won't
you
thank me for
absolutely
it
should.
though.
I'll see
She
if I
looks
can
like
dig
she's
out one.
gone through a bush background, but that's because and I'm there with my white socks pulled up over my knees because I'm such a fucking goody shoe shoes. Anyway.
Ah, gorgeous. Oh, Emma,
Oh.
thank you so much. That I feel like I do feel a little bit like I had a free therapy session. I feel like you're going to invoice me at the end of this. It was, but it was
Oh, I love you,
amazing because
Rosie.
I've a real interest in the kind of the psychology of grief, and I'll be honest with you, it's something that I'm considering looking into in the future because whether or not I can make a long-term living out of podcasting remains to be seen. But because what I do feels like sometimes intense counselling sessions. And when you were saying about, you close the laptop, you write your notes and you're done. And when I first started doing this, I would hold on to it and I would feel this real obligation. I used to write a handwritten card to everybody and I would want to remember, I put the dates of their partner's death in my calendar and I would really felt this kind of moral and like
It's the thorn.
self-inflicted obligation.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. And actually in order to do this and to do this for it's 3 years I've been doing this now, I've had to
Amazing.
stop because I can't. And sometimes somebody will say to me, what did you do? What interview did you have today? And I'll be like, I can't remember. And it's not that I don't care. And it's not
No.
like I wasn't wholly present in that interview. It's just that's now done. The laptop is closed. I'll come back to it when it comes to edit, but that is now done because you cannot sit and ruminate on somebody else's trauma. It's hard enough doing your own, right?
And that's where like I do find it fascinating. A lot of people say to me, how can you do what you do? And it's really interesting, the people who say it to me, like that's really interesting. Like sometimes it's because my husband was in the military, sometimes it's like these really impressive men with like racks of medals and they're like, I couldn't do it. And I'm like, yeah, that's because you're all Marine. um, but
Yeah.
no,
But they don't want to do
it's
the talky softy stuff.
but actually, one of the things that we mentioned before we came on was like the kind of change and rainbow hunting. And so like I obviously went back to work as a lawyer after my husband died, and then I pretty quickly realized it was a fast route to burnout. And then I gave it up because Simon had provided well for death and we had life policies and and actually the money made me feel a bit sick, but it gave me the financial freedom to be able to just take a pause and work out what I needed. And I moved house, so I wanted to sort the house out. And then we went into lockdown, and then I had a bit of an existential crisis because I was like, I'm not a lawyer anymore, and I know I'm not really fit for being a lawyer. It just doesn't fit in this new world that I'm in. But I could do it if I had to do it. And I love being a mum, but being a mum, having done tax exams on maternity leave, it's never really just been enough. I've always wanted to do something that's Emma as well. And so rainbow hunting just kind of started as an amorphous thing, but I had done a counselling course about a year after my husband died. And they actually said to me, like, yes, we can see you've got the empathy, but you are too soon in your grief. Like, this is way too soon. And
Interesting.
yeah, and I think that's why the coaching for so long was actually good, because I could do the more practical aspect of it. And actually it took me a lot longer than my peers to qualify as a counsellor, and I don't think that's a coincidence. I think it's because I wasn't ready, from a bereavement and a processing my
Yeah.
own stuff perspective. And then now I can hold other people's big stuff because I have monthly clinical supervision, and I tap in now to my own therapy, and I go to monthly sound baths and hot yoga, and I eat healthily, and I've learned that actually self-care is part of my business model, because I can't do my job unless I look after myself.
Yes.
um, but it's been like, so I do definitely say the wounded healer has so many benefits, but it's got to be at the right time for you, if that makes sense.
I think a lot of us, the need to help, the need to light the path for the others coming up behind us, that is a really common and really lovely aspect of being bereaved. But I can imagine people want to do it too soon and they want
Mm,
to immediately offer some help. And actually, you're right, you need to have that space between your
yeah.
trauma and when you start to begin to really do the intensive work with other people, because otherwise I'm guessing that you'd be quite vulnerable to being hurtled right back in, and of
And
course that's not good for you or the person that you're working with.
yeah, and I think it does become a little bit, I don't want to say dangerous because that sounds a bit dramatic, but it becomes a bit unhealthy, because
Yeah.
like I find that supervision is often where I take, when I was really fortunate, I had the most amazing tutor when I was doing my theory side of my counselling, and one of the things he said to me that I'll never forget is as a therapist I have like two screens in my head. I have what's actually going on in the therapy session for the client, where I'm actually 100% there, but I also park here stuff that comes up for me. And then I make my
Mm.
own decision as to whether that means I need to go back into therapy, or whether that's just something to take to supervision on a parallel process that's going on in my world, or something that is very similar to a hidden wound that I've had myself and all the rest of it. But I think it takes having done a lot of work on yourself. And I mean, I started therapy when my husband was alive. When he went to Afghanistan was the first time that I had therapy. So, I've tapped in and out of it a lot, and I always will, I think, because it's a good wellness tool. So
Yeah, I think I'm going to reduce mine. I feel like I'm in a place now where I can start to reduce it. But I'm not stopping yet. I think there's still quite a lot of uncertainty in my world. And I feel like until I'm completely settled, to pull away any other crutch would be doing myself a disservice.
And it's self-compassion.
Yeah, it is. It is. And it's become part of my routine. And yes, I don't always want to go, but I'm always glad I did. And it's like putting your bags down, isn't it? You're carrying heavy bags, you put them down and you leave them in there. And it's a relief. Now, Emma, if people would like to reach out and find you, could you just drop your socials in?
Yeah, so best place to start is always my website, which is really easy. It's www.rainbowhunting.co.uk, and there's links to my socials on there. There's also a link to my newsletter, because once a month, I used to do it more often, but once a month I send out a quite cool newsletter with blogs and podcasts, and I tell people when I do stuff like this, and I sometimes do little book reviews, so I definitely have to do one about your book. And then I send no more than weekly emails. So the other ones are just like, and I always put my weekly wins, because for us neurospicy people, like what you focus on grows, and actually putting into my newsletter for other people my weekly wins was actually helping me focus on actually, hey, this is going places. This is actually doing okay. So it helped me out too. And then my happy place is Instagram at Rainbow Hunting Moments. And I am in stories every single day. And I think social media is social media. So I might not get back to people immediately, because I'm very boundaried about my social media consumption. But I will always respond. And then LinkedIn, I love, because that was where my professional face was. And I'm on Facebook too. So yeah.
Amazing. Thank you, Emma.
I don't do, what is it that other people are really good at? Oh, what's the one the kids
TikTok.
like? TikTok. Yeah, I'm totally not there yet.
TikTok. Yeah. Everyone keeps telling me that I need to do TikTok, but I just think it's just another app that I'm going to lose myself in. And I've just figured out, well, I haven't even fully figured out, but I feel like I'm making progress, and it's just another thing. Brilliant. So one day, maybe we should launch into it together.
Makes me, I just worry
launch our
that it'll
TikToks.
soak up my time. Yeah.
This is it, and the nicest possible way. For what reward? Because if it's not growing the business and it's not feeding something in you, then it's just another demand on your time. And my worry is I'll spread myself so thin I won't do anything properly, which is kind of the story of my life, if I'm honest. Right. Well, Emma, thank you so much. Yeah, baby. Thank you so much for coming on. It's been an absolute delight. Emma and I are friends as well, so it's always a real privilege to get to chat to you in a professional capacity. If you have been affected by today's episode, and possibly by my oversharing, you can reach out. I'm at widowed_AF on Instagram, or my website is widowedaf.com. And Emma has given you her socials, but I will put them in the show notes as well for easy access. Any final parting words, Emma?
Just look after little you.
That's a really good message to take away. I'm going to go make little me a strong cup of coffee in a minute.
Love it.
But for now, it's goodbye from me and goodbye from Emma. But I will be back with you next week with another story from the forefront of widowhood. For now, guys, please take care of yourselves, take care of little yous, and take care of each other. Lots of love. I shall see you next time. Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening. If you found this episode helpful, hit follow or subscribe so you don't miss the next one. And if you think someone else may benefit from this, please do share. We'd also really appreciate a quick review. It helps more people find the show. Thank you again, and see you next time.